In our show today, South Africans on who they wear, the impacts of imports on our textile industry, and we go inside one of Mzansi's biggest fashion house. Bagaetsho dumelang and welcome to Consumer Guard. I am Palesa Muchuminyani. There is a saying, you are what you wear, and that's exactly what we'll be talking about today. We ask South African consumers if they know the impact of imports on the country's economy.
The last decade has seen the South African textile, clothing, leather and footwear industry at its most devastated, a direct impact of the inpouring of cheap imports into the country. The industry's fall off the skids dates back to the mid-1980s. By the 90s, many manufacturers closed down for business and tens of thousands of jobs were lost. Although still not enough, in recent years, the revival of the TCLF sector has seen the local industry players involved in a much-needed platform to launch a competitive sector. In the face of democracy in 1993, South Africa took part in talks on a new global trade deal aimed at setting lower tariffs and opening markets across the world. Most consumers in Mzansi say they know the impact of imports.
Depending on where your clothes are produced, I think it's important, of course, to support things that are produced here within our country. But then it also goes to, does the clothes that you actually produce, is it of quality, and does it actually reflect my personal style?
It does matter because, like, as a South African, I have to know what I'm wearing because, like, I have to support my country because too much things that are from other countries and so on. So, like, we as South African, we don't have that conscience to support our things. Because if something is made of South Africa, it's a cheap thing, it's useless, it's swag and so on. So,
because sometimes, let's say, if clothes are from China, let's say China, they're not good stuff. So we want something which is much better, a brand which is good, which when you put on, at least people will say, okay.
Yeah, it does matter. Because as for instance, those that are manufactured in China, as for me, my plus size, I can't get a size. But if we have locally manufactured clothes that can fit us, I think that will be really good.
Our country has the ability to produce and make its own products that can compete with the best in the world.
The long-term development of South Africa's local industry made more harm than offer protection. In fact, over the first decade of democracy, protection for the clothing and textile industry was lowered every year. Countries such as China built massive competitive clothing industries geared at export. Dismally, South Africa's local produce has been greatly sidelined by these imports. In fact, statistics released by SARS, exploring trade merchandise, which ended in April of 2017, shows that while imports into the country have dropped, trade surplus indicates South Africa's stabling performance in exports. We spoke to the CEO of Proudly South African, Mr. Eustace Maimbe, whose initiative promotes domestic industries and local produce, to find out how the SA textile industry, as opposed to imported merchandise, and the challenges facing the sector.
Current performance, the textile industry is not doing as well as we want it to do, but there's been a significant shift, I think, as a result of the mindset change, the cultural change that comes out of the different retailers that operate within the borders of South Africa, where I think they acknowledge, one, that if they don't contribute to the creation of jobs by buying and stocking up on locally manufactured clothing and textile items, there will be no one to buy from them, because if they don't contribute to the growth of the economy in that way and the creation of jobs in that way, if people are unemployed, the last thing you want to spend money on is clothing. So there's been a shift, but in terms of its current performance, there's been a shift, like I said, but it's not doing as well as we wanted to do. I mean, we still know factories that have closed down in areas like Hammersdale and Newcastle within that clothing and textile sector. We still know that there's still large volumes of imports that come into the country. Some of them illegally. There's still issues of under-invoicing, and people come in and bring in imported clothing items into the country. They under-declare the pricing.
South Africa's highest tie imports comes from China at the peak of 17.3%, followed by Germany at 10.50%, with tertiary from the USA standing at 6.3%, preceded by Saudi Arabia at 5.9%, and least of the five is India at 5%. An agreement has been put into place between retail stores and Proudly South Africa to ensure growth within our local industry.
With consumers, South Africans are very patriotic. One of the things that I've picked up in this job, South Africans are very patriotic. One of the things that one of the research studies that is done by Brand SA on an annual basis seeks to determine the level of patriotism among South Africans. And one of the studies looks at whether South Africans would opt to buy a locally made product versus an imported one if they understood the impact of their purchasing decision, the impact on the growth of the economy, the impact on the creation of jobs. And we've picked up through that South Africans are actually quite patriotic. They just need to be educated. And one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that there's more of these products at their disposal. South Africans are educated on the fact that some of the brands that they buy in some of the major retail stores actually made local. They would still buy it. The perception is out there that some of the locally made products are not of a high quality nature. So the education aspect needs to come in, and that's where Proudly South African comes in, where we educate consumers on the fact that if you see a product with the Proudly South African logo, it represents two main things. One, you see the logo Proudly South African is made up of the colors of the national flag of South Africa, which means the product is made in South Africa. And the tick represents the fact that it's of a high quality nature.
He says both South Africans and major local clothing stores realize the importance of supporting local commodities and are patriotic in their retail habits.
So as Proudly South African, we have a membership base. And so companies affiliate with us, and as part of the affiliation, we sign pledges with them. We work with them to increase their consumption of local products, to increase their support of local manufacturers, to increase their purchasing decisions that are done in favor of locally made products and services. And within the textile and clothing industry is no different, where we have now engaged four of the 5 major retailers in the country. And all of them have committed to say there's going to be a shift. And I'll talk about Edcon openly because they were the first ones to come on board, and everything that is carried in Edgar's Chat and Legit, and they're Proudly South African members. And where their base was as low as about 20% of everything in those stores was made locally, which the balance coming from elsewhere. The target is now to get to about 58% by the end of September, which is 3 months from now, of everything that is carried in those stores must be made locally. So there's that shift where, as a result of that intervention or that change in policy on their part, they have now found a factory in KZN called Cellrose, and that is where they manufacture their products. Some of the major and leading brands that are carried in those stores are actually made in Durban and KZN. And as a result of that increase in their uptake of locally made clothing within that factory, there's now an expansion of that factory into other factories within the surrounding area. So more people are getting employed. The economic impact on the ground is felt by people in those communities where the factories are based, simply because a major retailer has taken that decision. Mr. Price is the same, where they've also said, I think it's going to be corrected, but about 35% of everything that they carry at this point in time might be locally made. But there's a concerted effort on their part to also say those raw materials that are used in manufacturing that clothing must also be made here.
Clothing is a bare necessity that is suitably in demand. But are our retailers supporting our ever-growing local industry? Well, let's take a look.
clothing retailers in South Africa have enjoyed growing revenues. But with no surprise, the success of retailers with a global footprint are amongst the key trends to emerge in the country. This is according to Deloitte's 19th Global Powers of Retailing report in 2016. However, there has been positive changes by some retail investors in local textile and clothing production on some ends. Companies such as TFG have relooked their imports and opted to rather expand their local supply chain divisions whilst also investing locally. We approached top clothing retailers and asked them just how much of their stock and materials are sourced locally rather than imported. The Truworths Group says 45% of the outerwear in their stores is locally produced. They also cited that they plan to increase locally produced clothing in their stores each year due to quick response retailing. They added their store-wide EE comprises of 98% of local designs. Edcon, on the other hand, declined to speak to us. The Mr. Price Group said they had forwarded the request to the CEO and would get back to us, but did not do so before broadcast of this episode. We did manage to secure an interview with the Woolworths Group Head of Sourcing, Lawrence Pillay, to speak to them about their suppliers and how much of their stock is locally produced. This is what they had to say.
From a clothing perspective, 53% of our total buy comes out of the SADC region. So in other words, 53% of everything we source in clothing comes out of the greater Southern African region. Of this, 26% comes specifically out of South Africa. This translates to 30 million units per annum that is sourced out of South Africa. Like the cost of any product is influenced by a few key factors. Firstly, it's the cost of raw material. So in a clothing space, what is the cost of fabrics, what is the cost of buttons, what is the cost of zips, all of the raw material that goes into the product. The second is the cost of labor, so the cost to manufacture the product. And coupled with that is there's the standard utility costs, etc.
He also heard the group's plans to use locally sourced textiles and the other initiatives.
We certainly have plans to grow our local procurement. We have developed what we call an import replacement program that looks to understanding where our product is placed internationally and what initiatives needs to be driven in order to bring that product closer to home. When we look at where retail is going and we look at the challenges of retail, more and more there is the need to bring product closer to home. Firstly, it allows us speed and response time. It allows us to make product later. It allows us to hold smaller stocks. So all of those factors influence the need to bring manufacturing closer to home. Over and above that, there are many international challenges that we face, which is the currency volatility, which is geopolitical issues around the world where countries are closing their borders, countries are forming more and more trade pacts, and all of those factors influence how we source and where we source from. And more those factors are lending itself to bringing product closer to home. And we know for a fact that it is the right thing to do. It is where we need to be. It allows us to grow our local customer base. It allows us to grow our local manufacturing offer, and it allows us to bring newness quicker to our customers.
Time for us to take a break. When we come back, we continue to tackle issues and face retailers to find out how they influence South Africa's economy and job market.